Canish from Penn State Greater Allegheny. I welcome you to our final webinar in this series of 4 that Ben Williams has been presenting for us over the past 2 days. Aaron and I probably could perform this session ourselves at this point because we've now listened to all 4 of them. But we're going to get started. I think most of our folks are here with us already, so in an effort to avoid any more delay, we're just going to get started. I'm going to turn the microphone over to Ben Williams, who will give you a little bit of update about him since some of us saw him in the fall, and we'll be able to talk about the micro-messaging. One thing I want to mention to you is that since we are on the GoToWebinar format, if we unmute all of you at the same time, it sounds like a hurricane. So in an effort to cut down on the distractors, we ask you to either type questions into the questions panel on your control panel. If you have the little orange arrow up in the top of your screen on the right-hand side or wherever your control panel is, and sometimes it's minimized. If you click on that right arrow, you'll see you can show your control panel, and down near the bottom you'll see a questions box where you can type and we will respond to you. But also underneath that orange arrow in that list of icons, there should be a little hand where you can click on it and it will raise your hand, which means that for us and for Ben when he talks to you later, it will mean that you have a response that you would like to share, and at that point he will unmute you and then you can talk and everyone will be able to hear you. So we would prefer that you use the raise your hand feature so that everyone can hear you speak your ideas. But if you do not have a microphone, then we would encourage you to type your responses or comments in the questions box, and then we will be able to disseminate that out to the whole group. So when Ben asks you to raise your hand, you can do it that way, or you can type in the questions box. If you have any questions, type in that questions box and we will see it, and we can help you. If you're having problem hearing, or if you're having problem responding, let us know and we'll be able to help you out. So Ben, at this point, I'm going to turn the webinar over to you.
Terrific. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ben Williams, and I'm the Director of Special Projects with the National Alliance for Partnerships in Equity. I may have met some of you back in the fall when I was outside of Pittsburgh with the Monroeville group, and at that time I was a consultant with NAEP and working at Columbus State Community College directing the work in Ohio. Starting last week, I became the National Director of Special Projects for NAEP, so I'm very excited to be working with Pennsylvania in my new capacity as well as many other states and continuing to grow, develop, and deepen the work in Ohio as well. So we've had 3 really neat sessions thus far, and I'm looking forward to having the next hour with all of you today, in which we are going to be delving into a key area within the micromessaging curriculum and within the social learning theories unit, which is fixed versus growth mindset. And what we're going to be doing, as Patty was just explaining, is I'll be sharing things with you. Each of you should have a handout, or if not, you will soon, of this PowerPoint that you can reference. And then there's also a Research Nuggets handout from NAEP that gives a nice overview of this work. But I think so much of the value of these discussions also comes from each other. So as was explained, there will be times when I'll be giving you prompts and asking you to raise your hands, or for you to comment through the questions bar on your computer, so that we can all learn from each other's experiences as well. So I want to ground today's discussion in the work that you've done so far around micromessaging and tell you what my objectives, what my goals are for what we can accomplish today. So I'd like for everyone to have a broader and deeper understanding of what mindsets are and identify some of the behaviors associated with a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And if these 2 terms are meaningful already, terrific. If they're not, they will be soon. To be able to articulate the benefits of a growth mindset for students and then look at specific strategies that you can use to promote a growth mindset. And the reason why a growth mindset is so critically important is it's such an important aspect of students being able to see their capacity to continuously learn, to persist, to overcome obstacles. It leads to greater engagement and motivation to continuously develop in one's field, in a discipline, and over life. And it's also a key indicator of students' persistence in STEM, especially for girls and for women, which is critically important because when you look at STEM disciplines, all but health technologies are non-traditional for women, meaning that fewer than 25% of the workforce in most areas of STEM are women, and in some cases even fewer than 10 or 15%. But these same strategies are extremely important for men as well and for boys. So I'd like to ground us in the model that we've been using in the micro-messaging curriculum thus far. This is called the NAEP culture wheel. And where we start is with a recognition that our culture has stereotypes. And it's in human nature to categorize our world. But what we do is when we categorize our world, we make assumptions about certain groups of people in certain situations that may lead to biases. And so those biases then are expressed through micro-messages. And those micro-messages are subtle things that are said or done that convey a lot of information that can make people feel valued or devalued in a given situation. So it can lead to advantage or disadvantage. When it leads to advantage, it builds self-efficacy, or the degree to which someone feels they can be successful at something or believes they can be successful at something. On the flip side, when it leads to disadvantage, it can have a very negative effect on self-efficacy, which then makes someone feel that they cannot be successful at something, which then affects behavior, and that behavior includes engagement in a course, persistence in a program, movement towards completion of a program / degree, and ultimately entering into those fields. And this is a critical part of the process of looking at really how to be intentional about building equity within our career technical programs, and in particular increasing the participation, persistence, and completion of students in non-traditional programs and the participation of students who've historically been underrepresented in our CTE programs. So that includes not only diverse females in STEM, for example, but also underrepresented men in both non-traditional occupations as well as many of the high-tech, high-growth, high-demand pathways. In this morning's group, there was some really good questions about serving students from underserved communities, students who might be low income from under-resourced areas, and helping those students to build their self-efficacy as they are interacting with us in the classroom. So all of this is very much related to that process. And when we look at where we can affect change is in the messages that students receive in the classroom. It can be in the form of verbal micromessages, what is said, paraverbal or nonverbal, how it's said and how we communicate through body language. It can be contextual in terms of the curriculum, in terms of the context of the classroom and the program, what's around, what are the images, who are the people there, who are the people that are coming in and out. In the form of omission, what's missing and what does that communicate to people, and then also very important is how we give feedback and how that feedback is taken. So if you remember from our first day of micromessaging training, we went through all the different forms of micromessages and how they're communicated, and we looked at micro inequities and cues. And so this is all part of that process, and now we're looking at one particular area of micromessages, and that's around how people view their intelligence. And this is really important because when you think of micromessages, they themselves are neutral. But when they lead to someone feeling valued, included, encouraged, when it's a positive interaction, that's an affirmation, and that's what we want to be doing. But at the same time, each of us has experienced what we call micro inequities, or in some cases they're called microaggressions, where someone feels excluded, they feel devalued, they're discouraged. It's a negative interaction. And over time, that can really derail somebody pursuing a particular course, program, pathway, and lead to them leaving, as I think we've all seen in the past. So this is all part of the process that we use in the micromessaging curriculum, as well as the other areas of professional development in the STEM equity pipeline. And that is a model called PIPE, the Program Improvement Process for Equity. And in PIPE, we're exploring, so if you look at the top right quadrant, we're exploring what we know from national research in many different disciplines. Today we're looking at social learning theory, and in particular research that's been done in psychology, looking at the classroom and the experiences of students, especially in the STEM classroom, which, as I said, is non-traditional for females outside of health technologies, and health technologies, of course, is non-traditional for males, but is also relevant to pathways outside of STEM. And we're using that to then explore our own experiences, to reflect on what it was like for us as students, what it's been like for us as teachers, to then discover those biases that we might actually have that we don't even realize. And it's not a matter of pointing fingers, it's a matter of recognizing that we've absorbed messages from our society that may be conveyed through micromessages to our students. Then we, through learning and through reflection and through discovery, identify specific strategies that we might employ in the classroom to be very intentional about sending those kinds of microaffirmations that we want for students to receive, and then act on those in our classroom and look at its impact on key student outcomes, thus really helping us to be the kind of transformational leader, teacher, educator, change agent, role model, mentor for our students who can be a positive influence in their lives. So I want to ask you initially, when I say how do you view intelligence, is it something you think you're born with? Is it something that's built over time and over a lifetime? What is your perception of what intelligence is? And I'm going to go ahead and open this up for the group. And if you would just click on that raise hand, and I will see that, and then I'll call on you and unmute your microphone. So how do you view intelligence? Anybody want to raise their hand? Is it something that we're born with? Is it something that's developed over time? Just click on your little raised hand that Patty was describing, and I'll be happy to call on you. Looks like Colleen has her hand up. All right, Colleen, you're on.
I view intelligence differently in different categories. Intellectually, I do know about the growth and the fixed mindset, but I will admit, until I remind myself of that, there are areas that I feel like are more innate. For example, I don't think I'm really good at direction. I can walk into a mall and I have no idea which way I came from, and I feel like that's innate. And I dismiss that and allow myself to not get better at it. But I think there are other areas where I definitely think that it's growth, that I can certainly learn, and I can certainly expand what I know with effort, with resources, etc. So I kind of carry a mixed bag, even though I know better.
Well, thank you, Colleen. Well, it's interesting. Carol Dweck, Dr. Carol Dweck, is a psychologist at Stanford University who wrote a key book and did all sorts of research on fixed versus growth mindset. The book is called Mindset. It was published in 2006, and it's much of her work that I'm referencing in today's discussion. And one of the things she talks about is that an individual can hold a fixed mindset and a growth mindset view simultaneously, depending on the realm in which those are. So what you've just described is exactly what she talks about. So that's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Okay, anybody else?
And there are some comments. Ben, there are some comments in the questions panel, but I do not think those people can speak. They're just offering you their comments.
Okay, so it looks like Laura says that it's learned and developed over a lifetime. And Evan, I've always considered adaptability to be a synonym for intelligence. Okay, so in terms of learning how to adapt to a given situation, being able to continuously develop in our complexity of thinking over a lifetime is very much reinforcing that growth mindset that I was just referencing. So as I was saying, Dr. Dweck conducted research on how an individual's belief about intelligence affects their behavior. And what she found is that a person's mindset has a profound effect on their behavior when encountering obstacles. So if someone has a fixed mindset, they may see that obstacle as something that is a barrier that they cannot overcome. Whereas if somebody has a growth mindset, they might see it as a temporary obstacle that through different strategies they can overcome and be able to achieve whatever their objective is. And this is particularly important for girls in STEM because when you think about a fixed mindset, if one sees an obstacle as something that is unable to be overcome, and then that has a negative effect on her or his self-efficacy, when you look at research around self-efficacy and gender, what we know is for the majority of girls and women, self-efficacy precedes interest, which means that unless there is a sense that someone can be successful at something, especially a young woman, she's going to be less inclined to pursue it if she perceives that she will not be successful. So if there's low self-efficacy, it's much less likely that she will pursue that. Whereas if there's high self-efficacy, it's much more likely that she will. And so you can see how fixed versus growth mindset really play in with this. So I want to ask you, how do we go from this little girl, she looks just totally engaged and, you know, they're like a little sponge, just experiencing her world all around her. This little girl here, you know, exploring and discovering and a sponge in her environment, to a disengaged student in the classroom. And what Carol Dweck has found is a large part of that is how students view intelligence. And so fixed mindset is this belief that we're born with so much intelligence, that there's a certain amount, that it's stagnant, that it cannot be expanded. So basically if we have a big glass of water, there are certain students who have that glass of water full, others who have it half full or half empty depending on how it's perceived, those who have it a quarter full, third full, what have you. But there's only so much. Whereas a growth mindset is a belief that intelligence is something that can change through effort and through use of learning strategies. Through hard work, we can continuously become more intelligent. And so when you think about it, what do you think are the benefits of a growth mindset for students, and what have you seen among students with a growth mindset in your own classroom? So I'm going to open this up for response as well. So please raise your hand. What do you think the benefits of a growth mindset are for students, and what have you seen in your own classroom? Okay, Steve, you're on. Steve, I've just unmuted your mic. We should be able to hear you. Steve Rahal. Try again. Are you there? wonder if you responded through a question. Let's see. Students can learn from their mistakes. When I think about special education students, the whole point is that growth in intelligence can occur, isn't it? Yes, and that students see that they have the capacity to learn something even though they may be struggling with a particular task or challenge that they're facing, that with different types of strategies they can be successful at that. In some cases students may need accommodation, but they can be successful, and that's such an important message for them to receive. Steve, I'm afraid we don't have the audio, so we'll have to come back. I believe that the open mindset will allow for growth in self-efficacy because they believe they can learn. Yes, yes, absolutely. Anybody else want to comment through your audio? Okay. Well, thank you all. So when we think about a fixed mindset, it's a belief that intelligence or talent is unchangeable, whereas a growth mindset is a belief that these qualities can be developed through dedication, through hard work, through effort throughout life. And so when you think about fixed versus growth mindset, I'd like for you all who are in small groups to go ahead and talk in small groups, and those of you who are working individually to take a few minutes and reflect on these three questions, and then if there are people there with you, you can share your responses and discuss it, and then I'm going to ask folks to share with a larger group their experiences. So the three questions are: how do you think your own fixed or growth mindset affected you as a student in your own educational experience? How do you think mindsets are reinforced and communicated to students in the classroom? And then finally, what is the disadvantage to being labeled as smart? So take a couple of minutes and think about each of these three questions and either discuss these in small groups or reflect on it in your NAEP journal or a pad or what have you. You can write down your thoughts, and then I will call us back to share with each other to report out a little bit. So take a couple of minutes, and then I'll give you a 1-minute warning when it's about time for us to come back together. And I'm going to go ahead and mute my mic, and Patty, you can go ahead and pause the recording as well. Thank you. Okay, let's take about another minute to continue our discussions and reflection. If you've done the first question or two, go ahead and go on to the next one, and I'll call us back together. Thank you. All right, let's come back together, and Patty, you can go ahead and turn the recording back on. What I'd like to do is open up to the floor your reflections on these first two questions. How do you think your fixed or growth mindset affected you in your own education? And how do you think mindsets are reinforced and communicated to students in the classroom? And if you would, please raise your hand, and I'll call on you and unmute your mic. Okay, it looks like somebody posted something on the questions. Let's see. Laura says, my family is very good at math, and I so naturally it was assumed that I should be as well. As a result, I found myself working harder in math in order to stay at the top of my class. I am now a math teacher. At parent conferences, I am amazed at the number of parents who say to me, I just pray that my son passes. I am not good at math, so I know he isn't either. As long as he passes, I'm happy with it. So, Laura, are you able to comment on that? Because I think that's such an important point, because there's such a math phobia in our country, and so many parents, so many adults have really internalized a very, very low self-efficacy around math, and then they communicate that to their students or their children, and then their children really internalize that same message about themselves, and that particularly happens between mothers and daughters, which can be very damaging for that student's self-efficacy in that area, especially around math. So Laura, if you're able to talk, please click on your little hand, and I will unclick your microphone. In fact, I'm going to unclick your microphone. Oh, it's already done. Laura, you're on.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we are.
Okay, I'm sorry. I hear it all the time with my students that as soon as they come in, they have an idea of what grade they'll get based on how their parents did in the past or how they used to do in math. They very rarely come in with the open mindset of, I'm going to work harder, I'm going to do better, it's based on this year. It's always past experiences. And it's hard to break them of that habit.
So do you think that's an indication of an internalized fixed mindset?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then it gets reinforced at home. So it's all the more challenge for us as educators to help change that student's mindset so that they see that they have the capacity. So what are some of the strategies that you've employed where you think the mindset is communicated, especially around growth mindset for students in the math classroom?
You know what, to try to not go right from the book, to not do textbook problems all the time because that's what they're so used to seeing and used to failing at if they're not doing well. It's trying to take it out of the classroom and maybe do some real life examples and get them thinking that, hey, I've been doing math all along and I really can do this. That seems to be and as soon as you get that hook, as soon as you get them to understand that they can do it and have some confidence in themselves, they start to believe in you as a teacher as well. And then we could go back to the textbook problems. But I found that that's helped me in the past.
So you just brought up two critically important things that we know, and it bears out in research, it bears out in the classroom every day, and that is it's so important to tie what students are learning to things that are relevant to their lives, things that they've experienced, and you're tying it to things they already do. So they already have a sense of competence in whatever area that might be, and now you're saying, look how you use math every day, and look how you can continue to use it. The other thing is you talked about the importance of building relationship and trust with students, because when we're giving constructive criticism, we're giving constructive feedback, we're trying to build this growth mindset, students are going to listen to us if they believe us, and if they believe in us, and if they believe that we have their best interests in mind. So I think those two pieces are so critically important. So thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Looks like somebody else made a comment on the questions. Cynthia, growing up I felt and believed that I was smart, and that translated into success in many of my classes. Because that belief was reinforced by my parents, I expected to be good at intellectual things. Being smart never seemed like a disadvantage to me. Okay, Cynthia, are you able to talk with us over your mic? Yep, there you are. You're on. Cynthia, you are on if you want to talk more about that label of smart.
Ben, she's not on a microphone.
Oh, okay. I just saw it on the clip. Okay. All right. I'll go ahead and pop that off. So what's interesting is, you know, in some cases, being labeled as smart may not be a disadvantage, but in some cases it can be. So, for example, if a student has always been good at things, and then all of a sudden they run into a concept that they don't understand, if they have a fixed mindset around intelligence and they're not able now to overcome that obstacle because it's not coming quickly and naturally, that could actually really create a barrier for that student to learning. Whereas if they recognize that, yes, they've got a propensity to this, it really clicks, it makes sense, but even those for whom this might come more easily still might need other strategies, other mechanisms to help them to overcome that obstacle, to continuously learn. They'll be more inclined to ask for help, and that kind of seeking help is a critical skill for students to learn, and especially to continuously develop. Good stuff. All right, well, thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next slide, and then we'll have some more opportunities to share. So when we think about math and science, and back to the comment just a minute ago about the math classroom, and we think in particular about math and science and fixed versus growth mindset and the mindset benefits, growth mindset benefits for girls, when you think of fixed mindset, intelligence is seen as something static. And so when students don't perceive that they are smart enough, they may want to look smart. And part of looking smart in their eyes is avoiding challenges, giving up easily if there are obstacles, not putting in effort because they see it as fruitless, ignoring feedback because they don't understand that the feedback's coming in the spirit of helping that student with skill development, with strategies that can help them to be successful. And as a result, they may be threatened by others' success and be overly competitive even. Whereas a growth mindset, intelligence is seen as something that can be developed. There's a desire to learn, to embrace challenges, to persist despite obstacles, and to recognize that obstacles are part of the learning process, right? They are seen as something temporary. It's a temporary setback, as Carol Dweck talks about, as opposed to a barrier that is unable to be overcome. And they see this as part of the effort towards mastery. Students with a growth mindset are also more inclined to accept constructive criticism and to see that as constructive and helpful, and they're inspired by others' success rather than threatened by it. So some of the key strategies then for us to teach is to help students to see that intellectual skills are things that can be acquired. The brain is a muscle that needs to be exercised and used, and it gets stronger and stronger the more it is used. Right? We know from brain research that the brain itself is malleable, that there's what's called neuroplasticity. So as we make connections to things that we already know, we're able to make new connections. The aha we feel when something clicks is actually our brain growing, our capacity growing, our intelligence growing. So when we reinforce those things and we talk about the natural learning process and we talk about the fact that we know that we absolutely have the ability to continuously grow in our intelligence, the more students are going to be able to or will take on and internalize that belief in a growth mindset. We also need to highlight the struggle and our own struggle. So one of the things that's another critical strategy is to talk about our own journey. Each of us is an authority in our field, and we've mastered our discipline. However, it hasn't always been that easy, and each of us has had challenges and obstacles to overcome ourselves. Each of us has had bumps in the road in our own educational and career journey. And so if we can highlight those to students and they see themselves through us, they can see that that's part of the process. And look, this teacher, this scientist, this technician is somebody who is successful in this, but it didn't always come easy, and they were able to overcome these challenges, see them as opportunities, learn through the process, and now they're successful. So really valuing growth and learning and emphasizing that throughout the process. What we know from research that Dr. Dweck and her colleague Mueller did in 1998 is that even through small cues, there can be differences in performance for students. And so what they did is they took a group of students and they randomly assigned them to 3 different groups. One group was categorized as neutral, one was categorized as effort, so they were being given growth mindset cues, and one was categorized as intelligence, which was given fixed mindset cues. Basically, everybody had to complete moderately difficult logic problems, and after they completed the problems, the neutral group was given the cue, that is a very high score. The effort group, which was given growth mindset cues, was told that is a very high score, you must have worked hard at these problems. So you must have worked hard. So attributing their success to working hard. So that's reinforcing growth mindset. Then the third group was given a fixed mindset cue. That is a very high score, you must be very smart at these problems. So directly following that activity, those same students did a more difficult test of logic problems. And what the researchers found is that the students, based on cues, performed differently. Because remember, these students were randomly assigned, so they had the same characteristics, and so there shouldn't have been a difference other than in the cue. So for the group that was given a neutral cue, that is a very high score, their performance remained flat. For the students who were given an effort cue, a growth mindset, that is a very high score. You must have worked hard at these problems. They actually improved when they were given more difficult logic problems. What's really interesting is for the fixed mindset group, when they faced those challenges, they actually did less well with the fixed mindset cue. So this really reinforces the importance of being very intentional about the messaging that we use with students to help them to internalize that growth mindset. So what I want you to do now is I want you to take a couple of minutes, and either in small groups or individually, I want you to think about specific fixed mindset messages that you've heard in your own experience, either as a student or as a teacher. Might even be things that you've said in the past that you're realizing, oh gosh, that was a fixed mindset phrase I didn't even mean to say. And I want you to reflect now on how you could rephrase and reframe that message as a growth mindset cue. So I want you to take a couple of minutes and think about those, and then I would love to hear from the group your thoughts around that. So I'm going to go ahead and mute my mic again, and then I'll call us back together in a couple of minutes. Okay, let's come back together. And if we could, it would be great for people to share a specific fixed mindset phrase that they've either heard or used themselves, and then reframe it as a growth mindset phrase, message, or cue. So if you could just raise your hand and I'll call on you and unmute your mic. Okay, Colleen, I see that you've raised your hand and I've just unmuted your mic, so please go ahead.
Something just really simple. I've heard and used these. Someone says, I can't do this. I'm not good at it. And I just say, especially when we've given a little bit of background about the fixed and growth mindset, and I would say, well, you can't do it yet, or you're not good at it yet. And then that opens the door for them to think about how they could improve.
Fantastic. Yes, that whole notion, we actually call it the power of yet, right? You have the capacity to do this. It may not click yet, but I know that if we work on this, or if we look at different strategies, or if you continue effort, that it will pay off and you will understand it. Excellent. Yes, the power of yet. Love it. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, somebody else? See if anybody else has raised their hand.
There's a response in the questions panel.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll go ahead and click on that. Uh-oh. My question box went away. Let me see if, there we go. Okay. Here we go. I heard a Boy Scout leader once look to a couple of boys in his group and say, "You're gifted. You should know about this. Come on." It really muted those boys. Yeah. You're gifted. You should know about this. You know, probably, I'm sure that Boy Scout leader, and actually, I'm sorry, Colleen, are you able to tell us more about that? Or are you having difficult, oh, there you are. Would you like to share with us more about that experience with the Boy Scout leader?
Sure, that was from before in the couple of slides ago. I think it said the disadvantages to being thought of as smart, or how does being thought of as smart impact, and that was just an example that came to my mind is the students who were highly capable, labeled as gifted, whatever, were pulled out and put in a position in an unknown territory and expected, because they were labeled as gifted, to be good at everything. And for them, that was humiliating, and they were afraid to venture anything and be then thought of as stupid. And certainly it was an area they didn't know anything about, so they weren't comfortable jumping in and saying, well, now I can go master this, I'm ready to learn. They were instead kind of silenced.
So that whole term gifted is kind of has its advantages and its disadvantages, but one of the things is it ends up reinforcing a fixed mindset, doesn't it?
Exactly. That's, you're gifted with a certain amount of intelligence at birth.
Yeah.
And not that you have the potential to grow.
And you know, I experienced that with my own children. Neither of them has qualified for a gifted program, and they're both strong students. And one of the things is they, especially my daughter, were really upset that they didn't get into the gifted program, that it seemed to be something wrong with them. And so it really took a lot of discussion for me to help them to, and hopefully they internalize this, that it's not that they're not intelligent and that they're not capable. It just means that it may come more quickly to these students. They may be more advanced. But, you know, that whole notion can be really a sticky wicket. So let me ask you, Colleen, since we brought up the Boy Scout leader, what would have been another way he could have conveyed that message to those scouts that would have instead reinforced a growth mindset?
Directly, I just think to the whole group to be able to say, what does anybody know about this? What can we learn, or what resources do we need? Just kind of that idea that there's something, even if you don't know something specific about what they were doing, how could you learn about it? How could you gain, improve your knowledge base?
I love that. So kind of focus on strategies. What are things that worked for you in the past from other realm that you could use to solve this novel problem?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Okay, Cynthia commented, "You are so smart," versus "you figured that out quickly." Yeah. And you figured that out quickly. Actually, Cynthia, are you able to talk?
No, she's not.
Okay. So the thing about you figured that out quickly, that's an important, you're helping them to see the process of learning, but they may still attribute the fact that they figured it out quickly to the fact that they have so much intelligence. And so if we think about it, that can be the start, and then how do we reinforce that growth mindset further? You figure that out quickly by using those strategies that have been successful for you in the past, for example. So kind of helping them to connect all those pieces together. Good stuff. Well, thank you. I often catch myself saying the first thing to my granddaughter, I want to reinforce that she had to make an effort to understand it. Yes. Yes. Making an effort, that's the critical piece. Thank you all very, very much. I really appreciate your feedback and your thoughts. And so when we think about building a growth mindset in students, it's all about emphasizing effort, which we were just talking about. Hard work, smart work, right, over time. Employing different strategies. If this isn't working, try a new approach. Or the example of the Boy Scout leader, had he asked or she asked, what are things that have worked for you in the past that could help you to now confront this novel problem? And then the key is when someone has a growth mindset, they are much more likely to ask for help and to seek assistance. And this is critically important because students with a fixed mindset may be less likely to ask for help. And so they may become invisible in the classroom because often the students seeking help are those who might be eager to learn or who recognize that they have the capacity to learn, whereas the students who already have low self-efficacy and may have internalized a fixed mindset may be less likely to ask for help. Dr. Dweck talks about in her book about an experience that she had as a child when neighbor adults and children were going to the movies, and she came out to the street and they were all walking down the street, and she was paralyzed with fear and dejection and was very upset and went back inside and was asking herself, why don't they like me? I can't believe they left without me. And she attributed that to a fixed mindset. Had she had a growth mindset, she could have simply called out, hey, wait for me, and then run after her friends from the neighborhood and been able to join in the activity. So that fixed mindset can really block students when they face an obstacle. And in her case, it was the obstacle of folks walking down the street, but they were still within earshot. So it really reinforces, too, as was said just a few minutes ago, the power of yet. You may not get this now, but you will get this later. And let me help you to do that. You don't yet have it, but I know you can. You have the capacity to learn this. And so as was communicated earlier in our conversation today, it's so important for there to be trust and relationship with students so that they're able to take our feedback as constructive. And so helping students to see that we have high standards that we know they can meet. This is actually something that Yeager and colleagues call wise feedback. And in wise feedback, there's really a faith that the teacher has in the potential of that student to be able to reach his or her potential. And what's really powerful about wise feedback is it's particularly effective with students who may not have really trusted teachers in the past. Maybe they've had negative interactions with students and with adults in authority figures who have discouraged them in their past. So the components of wise feedback are really an invocation of high standards. So I have high standards, and I know that based on your potential, you can do better and achieve more. So here's a phrase that we could use. I'm giving you these comments because I have high standards based on your potential. I know that you can do better and it can achieve more. And I would add, and I want to help you to do that. And so that's where that trust, that relationship, and helping students to see that they have the capacity to do this can be so effective. So when you think about super strategies around building growth mindset, we want to teach students that intelligence and ability can be developed through dedication and hard work. We want to praise students for effort and struggle. We want to use that power of yet. And we want to look for ways to incorporate the 4 sources of self-efficacy. And what I mean by that is when we look at self-efficacy, and that is the belief that we have in our ability to be successful at something, there are 4 sources that we typically have. One is past mastery experiences, experiences where we've mastered something, we've been able to do that successfully, and we know that we have the capacity to do that in the future. Arthur Chickering talks about building competence before we can have autonomy. So we have to be competent in multiple realms before we're able to be autonomous. We also build self-efficacy through vicarious experiences, meaning through people with whom we have relationship and to whom we can relate. So that's where role models and mentors and highlighting our own struggle and our own educational journey can be so valuable to help students to see, oh wow, you know, Dr. Williams had difficulty with that when he was a student, and he was able to work on that and trying different strategies and look at the success he has had. Or, you know, any of us can be that illustration. Through social persuasion, and that is giving feedback that is specific and helpful to a student, that's constructive, that can be very powerful. And in physiological states is just helping students to recognize, for example, when we get butterflies in our stomach before we get up in front of a group of people, that's actually adrenaline in our bodies, and it helps us to focus, rather than an indication that we're no good at this and that we're going to fail. Because if we internalize those physiological states or those other areas as something that we're incapable of doing something, it leads to doubt, fear, avoidance, and ultimately not being able to reach our potential. Whereas when there's strong self-efficacy, it leads to engagement, persistence, greater performance, achievement, and then that motivation and excitement in learning. So when you think back to the culture wheel, and we start with these biases that exist in our society and the messaging that students are receiving throughout their lives, we can be very intentional about the micro messages that we send to affirm students and help them to feel valued and to see the potential that we see in them to build their self-efficacy, which will ultimately positively affect their behavior and help them to be successful in our classroom, to persist in our programs, to complete those degrees, and ultimately end up in those fields, especially those fields that they've been historically underrepresented, which is very much the case for non-traditional students as well as for other underrepresented students in these high-tech, high-wage, high-demand CTE pathways. So when we think about where we are right now, what we've done today is we've explored Dr. Dweck's work and the work of her colleagues. We've explored some of our own experiences and reflected on those, and I appreciate everyone having shared their stories. And I really encourage you now to, through peer observation, through additional self-reflection, identify those areas where some of the messages that you might be conveying to students might be inadvertently reinforcing a fixed mindset. Or see those opportunities where a student might be giving you a fixed mindset message about herself or himself, and you can help to, what's the word that we just used? Interrupt that negative micro-message and help them to see, well, actually, I know you have the capacity to learn this. I see your potential, and I know that with hard work and effort and other strategies, you can be successful at this. And I encourage you to employ these strategies in your own classroom, select those strategies, act on them, and look at what the impact is on your students. So here is my contact information, and I encourage you to read the Research Nuggets, which is a handout that everyone should have access to. I'm going to go ahead and pull that up. I guess I actually no longer have access to that. So it's a handout called Research Nuggets, Fixed versus Growth Mindset, that is a NAEP handout from the micromessaging curriculum that gives you a little bit more information on Carol Dweck's work and mindset, a small bibliography, and then specific strategies that you can employ. So in closing, Patty, is there anything else that you want to share with the group?
No, I just want to reinforce that Aaron Whitner Young sent the Nuggets document out already to folks who were registered, and it will be on our website. Folks, I'm going to just put a quick little thing in the chat box. I'm just going to type in our webinar, or I'm sorry, our website. I can't type and talk at the same time, I guess. Our website, so that you'll know where all of this information will be. We will have a copy of the video, a copy of the PowerPoint, a copy of the other materials that that Ben has talked about today. If anyone needs anything, please email one of us. Ben's email is there in front of you, and I'm sure you know Aaron's and mine by now. If not, then thank you very much for participating. We're going to let you go at this point. Have a good afternoon, and let us know if there's anything we can do to help you. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you all very, very much.